What's up guys, Kyle here again, and welcome back to another episode of FAQ'N Friday. Real quick before we get started, I've got two things today. Number one, Tweak My Tone submissions have been accepted. I have been reviewing them, and I will get an episode out this week, so thank you guys for your patience on that. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, starting a new series where you guys send me videos of playing your rigs and what you feel you're missing from your tone, sending me a video of it, and me basically giving you advice on how to get closer to the sound in your head. So the first episode will be up later next week. I appreciate your guys' patience. Again, really excited to get this series off the ground. It's just been a really busy few weeks for me. So look for that episode later next week. Number two, if you missed it, I am a Sweetwater affiliate now, as announced on my last FAQ video from Friday of last week. So that means that Sweetwater and I will be working together to give you guys some sponsored gear demos relative to the stuff that's on my channel, like speakers, microphones, interfaces, overdrives and distortion pedals, all sorts of stuff like that. On top of that, I have a Sweetwater affiliate link, so if you guys shop at Sweetwater, if you click that link down in my description and you buy something, that massively helps me out. So just keep that in mind. If you guys are, feeling froggy, you feel like spending a couple dollars with the fine folks at Sweetwater, go down in that description, click that link. I'll get a little kickback for anything that you grab. It helps this channel grow and helps me bring you guys more content. Thanks again for all your guys' support. I still can't believe that this is a thing. I'm hyped. But anyways, let's jump into some questions. First question comes from MBGmail. He asks, what are the differences between the best high gain tone each amp can produce? The amps being a Splawn Quick Rod and Ceriatone Chupacabra. If forced to keep one of those, which one would it be? MBGmail is a new subscriber. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks for your question, man. Really appreciate it. So I think I have touched on this before, but it's probably been a while. I owned a Ceriatone, or Ceriatone. There's always a debate on how it's pronounced, but I believe that Nick said that it is Ceriatone. I've owned the Ceriatone Chupacabra in the past, absolutely loved it. You guys know I own multiple Splawns. Splawns are kind of like my go-to for the most part, especially for Bushido code. I loved both of them. I love the Ceriatone. I wish that I still had it, to be completely honest. They're not easy to track down, and the fact that I had a Chupacabra and a Yeti at the same time and let go of them both kind of kick myself now. I would like to get one of the two back here in the near future, probably the Yeti, as the Yeti was a little bit tighter, a little bit more aggressive. The main differences between the two. The Chupacabra is a take on the Jose mods of the 80s that were super popular, where diode clipping was added, there was an increased gain stage added, I believe, in some of them. I mean, they were all kind of a little bit different. He had a standard mod, but he deviated from that quite a bit. The Chupacabra is based on that, and it's got more compression, it's more polite, it's more smooth. It almost kind of reminds me of like a Friedman type tone, but not quite that smooth and refined. It's just, it's a little bit scoopy in the mids. The mids aren't that super bright Marshall Kerrang that you're used to from like a JCM 800 or a 1959 Super Lead. They're definitely dialed down a bit, a little bit more low mid based and a pretty big low end, where the Splawn is very much just a JCM 800 with some added gain, some added low end, and some tightened low end. The mids have been rounded out a little bit, but they're still extremely prevalent, extremely forward. So I think that's why I tend to like the Splawn better than the Chupacabra. Just for me, it's got more of the classic JCM 800 or JMP 2203, I guess would be the correct model. It's got more of that voicing in it. It's a little bit more true to the amp that it's modded off of, and I love a JMP 2203 with a good boost out front, especially with the Legendary Tones hot mod installed. But that bass tone has always been amazing to me. I just always wanted a little bit more saturation, a little bit more punch out of it. And the Splawn, in my opinion, delivers that. The Chupacabra is more of your standard 80s modded Marshall tones, where things are smoother, more compressed, a little bit more scooped in the mids. So they both have their strengths. They pair really well together. But if I was going to choose one, and I essentially did make that choice, I kept my Splawns, I sold the Ceriatones. But I would like to get another Ceriatone here in the near future. Joshua Ortiz asks, what are your thoughts on combo versions of high gain amps? For example, Mesa, EVH, Archons, etc. I recently bought a 2015 Archon combo for a steal. Never considered combo amps since I always preferred my head and cab configurations. Now I'm really digging the tones and portability aspects of the combos. I can't read. Have you ever owned any high gain combos or considered them? Have you ever toured with any? Thanks. Thanks for your question, Josh. Yes, I own a number of high gain combo amps. Right now I've got the 5150 212 combo, the 6505 Plus 112 combo, the PV Ultra 112 combo, Carvin V3 combo, the ultimate combo breaker. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I've owned a number of combos. I own a number of combos right now. Personally, for me, I'm not a combo guy for a number of reasons. Number one, they are obnoxiously heavy. Like the 5150, I dread having to move that thing whenever I've got to move my space around. Hate moving it. It's insanely heavy. It's extremely large. It takes up a lot of space. It's an awesome, awesome sounding combo, but man, I hate moving combos around. I would much rather carry a head and a 4x12 cab separate any day of the week, as 4x12 cabs don't bother me because you can pick them up from the sides and kind of, you know, hold them against you, and they're easy to move around in that regard. And heads are easy to move around because you can just hold it by the handle or toss it over your shoulder or whatever. But combos, man, you really have to hold those just right, and as soon as they start slipping, you're all off balance. They're just, it's too much for me. So that's one reason why I don't really care for combos, especially in like a gigging touring aspect. The second reason is, even if they're a sealed back combo, the dimensions of them are smaller. They're trying to fit as much as they can in a smaller package. So like even with the EVH 2x12 combo, yeah, it's sealed back and yeah, it's an all birch cabinet, but at the same time, it's thinner and there's not a lot of internal volume where those speakers are, so you're not gonna get very much bass response out of those, whereas a 4x12 is gonna have a lot more internal volume, or even something like a Mesa 2x12 will have more internal volume. It'll sound bigger, it'll put out more bass and be less thin, so that's another thing. And the third reason is a lot of those combos have open backs. So if you're trying to play high gain stuff with an open back combo, you're gonna notice your palm mutes aren't gonna have a lot of definition, they're not gonna have a lot of push, they're just gonna kind of sound washed out. And while open back combos kind of disperse sound more evenly and they sound good, you know, at different points in the room, you're just never gonna get that same low end punch out of them that you would out of like a sealed back 2x12 cabinet that's a dedicated cabinet versus a combo. So the circuits in those amps, I mean, they all sound great. The ones that I have now, they all sound fantastic, but in the long run, I'm never gonna take them everywhere or take them anywhere because moving them is just such a pain. The Ultra 112 is probably the most portable. That one's not bad at all, but that's another open back cabinet and it's got no low end punch. So if you make it work for you, if it sounds good to you in your situation, that's great. I'm sure, I mean, I don't think that combos sound bad, open or closed back. Just for me, I prefer the punch of a sealed cabinet, a sealed dedicated speaker cabinet versus a combo. So yeah, there's that. Empire Light asks, any plans on checking out the new Fractal Audio FM9? Thanks for your question, man. Yeah, if you guys missed it this week, Fractal released information on the new FM9 modeler, which is supposed to be, I believe, an expanded and a more powerful version of the FM3 modeler, which I currently have. In all honesty, I don't know if I'll check it out. I'm not much of a modeler guy. I bought a whole bunch of them recently to try them out, and the only one that I really find myself enjoying is the Quad Cortex, and I think that that's just because it's so easy to dial in. I tend to be a pretty tech-savvy dude, but when it comes to like the FM9, and I had a Fractal FX8, which was the other, you know, older floor modeler that they had, I found that those things were really cumbersome. They have a big learning curve. I typically am playing through a powered power amp into an actual guitar cabinet, so having to adjust each patch to remove whatever speaker cab simulation is on there and save it, just getting through all the menus and everything, man, I found that for me personally, and you guys may feel differently, and you guys may have those systems down pat too, which that's another thing, is I'm not blaming the system itself. It's more of me basically spending more time with my guitars and my real amps and swapping those around and trying different actual speaker cabinet configurations with amps and stuff like that. That's what I like spending my time on. I don't like digging through a single modeler and trying out a million different combinations in there, because it's just, for me, it's not as exciting, it's not as much fun. I think the FM3 is an insanely useful product, and I'm sure that the FM9 will be even more so, especially for traveling guitarists who gig all the time, who need all sorts of different sounds and effects at their feet, and all they have to do is bring this one, you know, pedal side or pedal board sized thing with them, and they have everything they need. That is insanely useful, especially for how good all the tones and the effects are in the Fractal modelers. But for a person like me who my whole deal is checking out physical amps, physical cabinets. It just doesn't make as much sense for somebody like me, and I've kind of found what I've wanted in a modeler in the Quad Cortex, because not only is that insanely easy to navigate for a person like me, it's all touchscreen, it's all basically like drag and drop, super easy to throw together a rig in a very small amount of time. But I can capture my own amps and my own cabs and take them with me. And to me, that's awesome, because now I'm not relying on somebody else's version of an amp or somebody else's modeling of an amp that, you know, they thought that that was the ideal sound to get out of the amp. Now I can capture the amp, my own amp, as I have it set up, any modifications, any tube changes, any of my pedals out front. I can capture all of that and just kind of, you know, do the same thing I do here in real life. I can drag and drop my real cabinets, my real amps, my real pedals, and kind of set up a rig how I see fit that's gonna be all my, you know, captures of my own equipment. And to me, that's awesome, that's invaluable. So I'm gonna stick to the Quad Cortex. In the future, I may jump into modelers a little bit more, it all depends, because I am interested in them. But as of right now, I don't know that I'll be checking out the FM9 when it releases. I may give it a little while before I jump into it. So Jack Florio asks, found your channel today and I love your videos and gear collection. I recently bought a 1980s Marshall 410 and I love how light and portable it is, but don't dig how muddy it sounds. The head I use primarily is a JCM 2000 DSL50. What 10-inch speakers would you recommend that would be clear, tight, and satisfying to play? Thanks. Thank you for your question, Jack, and honestly, I'm gonna leave this one up to the community. The reason for that is I don't have any experience. I believe that the cab that you got was a Marshall 1965 is the model number. It's their compact 4x10-inch cabinet. I've never played one of those. I've never even seen one in person, so I don't know how they sound. I also don't have any experience with 10-inch guitar speakers. So I personally cannot help you out. Now, I know that a lot of the people who watch my channel are just as into the gear thing as I am, so if any of you guys have checked out the 1965 cab or any 10-inch based speaker cabinets and speakers, and you guys have some suggestions for Jack, put them down in the comments. I personally, myself, am curious on this one too, because I would like to try something different. All I've ever known is 212 and 412 speaker cabinets, and to have something a little different like a 4x10 cab that actually sounds good as an option, I think would be really cool. And if you can make that sound good for yourself, that kind of sets you apart right there by having something different that, you know, 99% of other guitarists aren't gonna have. So I'm curious myself. I know that there are lots of guitar companies out there that make 10-inch speakers. I know a lot of them are aimed at like Fender style circuits, but even so, that doesn't mean that, you know, there aren't some out there for the higher gain Marshalls, modded Marshalls, or even like the modern high gain stuff. So thinking outside the box, while, you know, there are industry standards, if you want to call them that for a reason, thinking outside the box and trying something different could get you something that you really love and you never expected. So kind of going off on a little tangent here, but yeah, if you guys have any suggestions on 10-inch speakers for Jack and myself, because I'd be curious to check some stuff out, please put them down below in the comments. I would really appreciate it. All right, last question for today is gonna come from my man, Wes Ness. He's been a supporter of the channel pretty much since the beginning, so thank you for your question, Wes. He asked, do you ever use an EQ pedal? If you do you use them before, after, or before and after your preamp? By the way, congrats on the Sweetwater affiliation. Thank you, sir. Yeah, EQ pedals. So I own an MXR 10-band EQ, and then I own a cheap Chinese 6-band EQ, one of the little mini ones. I think it's like a Donner. I typically don't really use them that much, and I'll tell you why. The reason that I don't use EQ pedals that much is because I like to keep my rig as simple as possible. I typically don't have any effects that go through the effects loop, so a 10-band EQ is extremely useful in the effects loop of an amp, because you can kind of drastically alter the tone stack with the EQ pedal and kind of get it to be more of what you want out of an amp if it's not quite delivering what you want it to. Or if it is and it's just, you know, it's just a little bit off in a certain frequency, you can use that 10-band EQ to tweak things to your liking. I think that they're a great tool, absolutely. But me personally, I have a lot of amps that when I put them through the right cab with the right guitar, man, it's just, to me, it needs nothing. And the more things that I have to tweak, usually the more distracted I am with dialing in a tone as opposed to actually playing whatever it is I'm plugged into. So I try to stay away from using stuff like that if I can. But at the same time, there are certain amps that really benefit from an EQ in the loop. Like a Mesa Stiletto, I had a couple Mesa Stiletto Stage 2s, and while I think they're cool amps, they're extremely bright, not only in the top end, but in the mids. The mids are just insanely forward, and they also lack a good low end response. So that amp with the 10-band EQ in the loop, I had a lot of success with really taming the frequencies that drove me nuts about it and boosting some bass frequencies to get a little bit more bass reaction out of it. So I'm actually going to make a video pretty soon here. Number one, on using an EQ in the loop of an amp and how much you can drastically alter your tone just by putting an EQ in the loop. And number two, shaping your tone going into the front of the amp. And I'm going to use the 10-band EQ in that video too and show how if you have a guitar that has too much bass or too much high end or not enough mids, you can fix a lot of that if you like the general voicing of the pickup you're using by sticking an EQ in front of the amp and just doing little tweaks on the EQ to kind of get the frequencies where you want them coming out of your guitar before they get into the amp. Keep your eyes out for that. I generally don't use them. I'm not opposed to them, you know, for any reason. You guys know that I like my pedals, especially my boosts in front of my amp to help shape my tone. But for simplicity reasons, I don't want to have another pedal on my board where I have to run two separate lines to the effects loop and then have another 10 controls to mess with on top of everything else that I'm playing with. So I just prefer simplicity. But yeah, that is gonna do it for me this week, guys. Thank you so much for your questions. The previous episode was a lot of people interacting with me in the comments, which I love, but not asking a lot of questions. This week, I had an absolute abundance of questions to ask. But this week, I had an absolute abundance of questions to answer. So thank you guys for listening to me. Thank you for putting your questions down below in the comments. I'm having a hard time with this one today. Thank you for putting your questions down in the comments. Please do so again this week, especially if I didn't get to your question. I want to try to get to everybody, so put your questions for next week's episode down in the comments and I will do my absolute best to get to them. Thank you guys so much for your support. If this is your first time here, thank you for stopping by. Hit that like button on the way out if you enjoyed the video. Consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Head down into the description of the video where my Sweetwater and Amazon affiliate links are, my Facebook group, my Patreon, my Discord server. I got all sorts of cool stuff down there. Go down there and check it out. Appreciate you guys as always. Kyle here again. We'll see you next week.